Well, hello 3C. We're going to take a review of sine law and cosine law today. This is nothing new. You did this in the previous spiral. But our goal is I can choose between sine law and cosine law when solving for sides and angles in non-right triangles. But the only thing new we're going to do here is that the triangles could be sine law or cosine law. Back in spiral 2, we didn't mix them together. You knew that you were going to use sine law when you started, or you knew you were going to use cosine law when you started. Well, now we're going to mix them up. So we're going to go through case by case what you can expect if you're going to use sine law or cosine law. So let's think about these cases. This case says, I have an angle and the side across from it with known values plus one other piece of information. So there's nothing on this triangle right now, so I'm going to show you what I mean for this situation. It says I have an angle and the side across from it with known values. So that means that one of these angles, let's pick this one here. Let's say this one is 40 degrees. Okay. It means that one of those angles has a number on it. So I'm just going to make this smaller. Okay. And then it says the side across from it also has a known value. So let's say this has a 12. Okay. We don't know what it is. Let's make it 12 inches. Okay. And then it says plus one other piece of information. So one other piece of information means an angle or a side. So if I have this angle here, or this side here, that would be one other piece of information. So I'm just going to randomly stick some other number on here and say that this is 13 inches over here. Now this is a situation that we would have called the handcuff, because I have an angle and the side across from it both with known values. Now if I'm going to do this one, this is a case of sine law. That's when we have the handcuff, we have the case of sine law. Now if I were going to actually complete this, I have this side and I could find this angle across from it using sine law. So this is a case of where we're going to use sine law to find an angle. Now the next one says I have a triangle with side lengths of all three known values. So that would mean that this was, say, 20, and this was, say, 10, and this was, say, 5. Okay. That means I have a triangle with all three sides that have known values. Now, there's no handcuff going on here. To have a handcuff, I have to have numbers with both that are across from each other, an angle and a side. And since I have all three sides, it's not a handcuff situation. So this is not sine law. This is in fact cosine law. And it's cosine law where I'm finding an angle. So this is the formula that we need to use. Okay. It's the you're surrounded situation, not the Pac-Man situation. Carrying on, case 3 says I have the Pac-Man situation. As soon as you have a Pac-Man situation, which means you have two sides with values plus the angle between them, so let's say two sides, so 10 and 25, and you have the angle between them, so let's say this is 101 degrees. Okay. This is the Pac-Man situation. You have the two sides and they're eating the angle between them. Let's call this centimeters, and let's call this centimeters. This is the Pac-Man situation, and the formula for the Pac-Man situation is this one. And the last case, I have two angles. Okay. So it says I have two angles and the side between them. So let's say we know that this is 40 degrees and this is 35 degrees. So we've got the two angles and the side in between them. So let's say that this is 10 inches. Now this is kind of the opposite of the Pac-Man situation. The Pac-Man had two sides with an angle between them. This one we have two angles with the side between them. Now this doesn't look like anything that's not the Pac-Man. It's not you're surrounded, and there's no handcuff. I don't have an angle across from a side. But what I would like to point out is that we can find this angle very, very easily. we can do 180 degrees minus 40 plus 35. And then we will have the Pac-Man situation once sorry, not the Pac-Man, the handcuff situation, once I do have those two numbers. So this is another case of sine law, and it's sine law where we're going to find a side length, because once I know this angle, this one right in here, then I can have the Pac-Man and I can figure out any other side I want, because now I have all the angles. And so the formula you're going to use is this one here, the handcuff for finding a side. Carrying along, we're just going to analyze these situations. I will do one of each, but we're going to talk about and we're just going to set them up. I'm not going to follow through on them with the calculator work. We're just going to plug in the numbers, and then you can plug in the numbers on your calculator. So what formula would you use in each of the following situations, and then solve? So we want to find AC. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually mark on AC. So AC is over here, and we're going to put an X on AC. Now this says we want to find AC, and I want you to notice that we have an angle and the side across from it both with no numbers, which means that we now have the handcuff situation here. So let's go about setting up our values. So we want to find X, so we're going to use the sine law version that has the side on top. A over sine big A equals B over sine big B. And now I'm going to fill it in. What I'm finding here is X, so I'm going to put X on top. And then we have 28 degrees across from the X, so I'm going to put sine of 28 degrees on the bottom. Over on the other side, our B is the side length, so we have to put 15 on top, and then 92 on the bottom, sine of 92 degrees. Now if I'm going to solve this, I'm going to cross multiply and divide. So what that ends up looking like is X equals 15 times the sine of 28 divided by the sine of 92. And that's what you're going to plug into your calculator. I'm not going to plug it into my calculator. You can go ahead and do that. Now the second one has all three side lengths. And so all three side lengths is the you're surrounded situation. And the formula for the you're surrounded situation is cos C equals A squared plus B squared minus C squared over 2AB. Now if I'm going to fill the numbers into this formula, I first have to know which angle I'm looking at. Now it doesn't matter which angle we're going to do, but if you have a choice, if they don't specifically tell you which angle you're going to do the biggest one first, and that way you can use sine law to find any other sides. Right now, I think I'm going to find angle A. And if I find angle A, here's how I have to fill that in. First of all, I'm going to write cos of angle A and equals, and then the way I fill this in, whatever angle we're finding, the side across from it is this C value. So this is my A, this is my B, and this is my C. Whichever one I'm finding is the C value in this formula. So I'm going to write 17.7 squared plus 28.7 squared minus 25.6 squared divided by 2 times 17.7 times 28.7. Now you can plug this into your calculator. Just remember that once you get a number here, you're going to leave it to 4 decimal places. And the reason you leave it to 4 decimal places is so that you don't have any early round off errors. And I'm going to leave that up to you to plug that into your calculator and find it to 4 decimal places. And just remember that when you're finding an angle, the last thing you're going to do is do the inverse cos -1, of whatever number you found here, and make sure you leave the 4 decimal places. Let's look at the next one. This one says find AB. Here's our side AB, and I'm going to put an X in there. Now what I want you to notice on this one is that we have two sides with the angle between them. These two sides are eating the angle in between them, which makes this the Pac-Man situation. And the formula for the Pac-Man situation is c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab times the cos of c. Now when we fill this in, the side we're finding is the c. So we're going to put x squared in here. The a and the b are the two sides that we're given. So 13 squared plus 20 squared minus 2 times 13 times 20 times the cos of the angle in between them, which in this case is 93. Now when you fill this in, and again, I'm not going to do that, you can plug this into your calculator, but you can just plug all of this into the calculator all at once, and that will give you an answer for x squared. And just remember that when you get your answer for x squared, to find out what x is, so that we don't have that squared anymore, you have to take the square root of whatever the answer you got up there was to get your final answer. And it's always going to be approximate, unless it was a perfect square, which is very, very unlikely. Now the next one asks us to find this angle. So this angle here is across from a side with a known number, and we also have an angle and a side across from a known number. So this is a straight up application of sine law. So we're going to use sine law for finding an angle. So I'm going to write this one down. Sine of capital A over little a equals sine of capital B over little b. Now what I'm finding is c here, so that's what I'm going to fill in here. Sine of c, and what's underneath it is what's across from it, so 11. And then over here I have to do sine of the angle that I'm given, so 98 degrees. Across from B is 19. Now when we do this one again, we have to remember that we're going to, we're finding this here, so I have to cross and divide. So that's going to give me sine C equals 11 times the sine of 98 degrees divided by 19. Now that's going to give you sine C. And move up here. Plug that into your calculator. Sine C is going to be 1. Make sure you put it in 0, decimal 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places again, because in the next step you're going to take the inverse sine, sine -1, of whatever that number was there, 0.1234. We want to leave it to 4 decimal places. And that will give you your final answer that you can round to the closest degree. And I'm going to leave that for you to plug into your calculator. And lastly, angles. Find AC. AC is this one here. And you will notice that I don't have the Pac-Man. This is a situation I've got two angles with the side between them. This is what we call the hidden handcuff, because I can find this value here by doing 180 minus 83 minus 38. So 180 minus 83 minus 38 is 59. And now that I know this is 59 degrees in here, this is sine law again. I have my whole handcuff, and I can find AC here because I know the number, or the value of the angle across from it. So let's set that up in sine law. I am finding x, which is a side. So I want the value of sine law that finds a side, or the formula of sine law that finds a side. So we're going to put that on top. A over sine A equals B over sine B. My A in this case that I'm finding is x, and across from the x is sine 83. Now the B part is the whole handcuff here, and we have to start with the side because I put sides on top. So we have 25 over sine 59, and that's x equals, remember we're going to cross multiply and divide, so we have to cross multiply and divide. So we have x equals 25 times the sine of 83 divided by the sine of 59. And when you're done there, that'll just be your answer. You don't have to do any inversing on that or anything. That'll be your answer. It's a side length round to 1 decimal place. And that's the recap of sine law and cosine law.